What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today we're going to be discussing the latest rumor surrounding the New York Giants, and that's Bobby Okereke. He might get traded or released this offseason. We don't know, but according to Pat Leonard of the New York Daily News, there are several members of the Giants' top brass who do not have a high opinion of Bobby Okereke. Now, let me just say this. I find that to be ridiculous, and I don't even know if I fully buy it. Listen, I'm not saying that Pat Leonard has got his sources wrong here or whatever. I don't know. Whatever's going on, it doesn't add up to me because Bobby Okereke is a player who's been with the Giants for 2 years, has totaled over 240 tackles across 2 seasons, played through fractures in his bones last year while the team finished 3-14, yet they don't have a high opinion of him. Something doesn't add up to me here. So I'm wondering if maybe Okereke doesn't want to be with the Giants, or if maybe the Giants are preparing to package him in some sort of other deal, which we're going to talk about in a second here. This is just a little bit confusing to me. We're going to try our best to unpack and react to this reported news that the Giants are not high on Bobby Okereke. But before we do that, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what is your initial reaction to this report coming from Pat Leonard of the Daily News?
I'm doing pretty good, man. And listen, I don't share the sentiment the Giants brass do, if this is true, Anthony. And may I remind everyone who signed Bobby Okereke to the contract in the first place, Joe Shane. Now the Giants brass don't like him. This is part of the problem here, that they can't sign players, they can't draft players, they can't develop players. Everything they do, they seem to go 180 on and then want to go the other direction. This is just kind of ridiculous at this point. Bobby Okereke is a very, very solid pro. Like you said, played through many injuries. He wasn't amazing last year, but he was excellent in his first season, and he was injured last year, so that probably has something to do with it. I think he had a broken pinky, he had cracked ribs. How do you expect anyone to play through stuff like that at a high level, especially when your offense is never on the field? So people in that room saying, well, if it's true that they don't think that Okereke is a valuable piece to this team, not only do I disagree, but I think it's the opposite. I think Okereke knows that he could be on a better team, playing at a higher level, and winning football games. Not being on the Giants where their offense can't stay on the field averaging 15 points a game. Not on a defense that gets turned over every single year. The scheme is different. You know what I mean? I think it's the opposite. I think he wants to leave. Now, if it were true, Anthony, here's how it would work. Because you can't cut him. You're only going to save $3.5 million in cap savings, and you're going to take on $10.9 million in dead money. The alternative would be you post June 1st cut him, and you save $9 million, and then you have $5.5 million in dead money. But that's basically takes the dead money and spreads it out half this year and half in 2026. Why the hell would you do that when you could just let his contract expire naturally after 2026? Or 2025, rather. Just let it expire. You know what I mean? We're going to go out and sign another free agent. We have other needs. Defensive tackle. We have a cornerback need, a quarterback need, a receiver need. We have offensive guard need. We have needs everywhere. Why create another hole for $3.5 million in cap savings unless you're going to be able to trade him for probably a late round pick, because there's 1 year left on his deal, and just to get rid of $10 million. $10 million for a player like Okereke, in my opinion, is really good value. I don't necessarily believe this report, personally. I don't think that this makes a lot of sense to me, because there's no reason that Okereke should be traded or moved. He's an immaculate pro, and he's a strength on this team. We've gone through the days of having poor linebacker play. I don't really view this as a solution. I view this as another problem in the waiting if this is true.
Can I tell you why I maybe do believe this report? Because it's the New York Giants. And this seems to be what they do lately. They get good players in the building and they let them go. Inexplicably, oftentimes, they just let these guys walk out in free agency, don't re-sign them, or they trade them away. However they can get rid of their best players, they find a way somehow to upset them or send them off without any warning or without any explanation. So there is maybe some truth to this, in my opinion, just because this would add up with all of the moves that the New York Giants have made over the last couple of years. Now, does it add up in my head? No. Like you said, Alex, it doesn't really make sense to me. I think Bobby Okereke is a really good linebacker. I think his contract is favorable to the New York Giants. I think they should be eager to keep him on that contract. In fact, he's a player that I would think you want around long term, maybe even to an extension or restructuring his deal to ensure that he is here for numerous seasons down the line. Let me get this out of the way, because a lot of Giants fans keep responding to these rumors on social media and saying Okereke had a down down year last season. Okay, let's move on from him. Okereke did not have a down year last season. We need to get rid of that stupid narrative. Maybe in comparison to the season that he had in 2024, statistically speaking, he was not as good. He was playing through injuries. The Giants' defensive line in front of him significantly regressed. He was playing with terrible talent all around him, trying his best. Yeah, he had the one play where maybe his effort came into question. He was also running with a fractured bone on that play. So that's going to hurt your effort, and that's going to hurt your ability to chase down a running back who just went through a gaping hole on your defensive line and rushed for 40 yards on a play. That's what was really going on last season with Bobby Okereke. He was injured, and his defense was dismantled, and all of the talent that used to be next to him was gone. It makes it much harder for him to personally succeed, put up the same numbers, and be the same player when you have those factors working against him. So I think Okereke is still a good player. He's only 28 years old, and like you said, Alex, his average salary of $10 million per season is a goddamn bargain. The Giants would be asinine to move on from this player, unless they're sacrificing Okereke in order to make a deal for a bigger fish. And what would that bigger fish be, Alex? That would be the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. That's the only way that trading a Bobby Okereke makes sense to me, because let me break this down. The Giants are reportedly seriously interested in trading up for the number 1 overall pick, and one of the rumored trade packages that has been thrown out there is a potential swap between Kayvon Thibodeaux and Harold Landry of the Tennessee Titans, plus some mid-round picks in order for the Giants to move up 2 spots. I don't like that deal. I know, Alex, that's a deal that you want to discuss at more length later on this weekend, which we're hinting at a big episode coming. I know that that's a deal that you kind of have entertained a little bit. Maybe you like it, the contract swap between Thibodeaux and Landry. I hate it. I think it's stupid. I don't think it makes sense for the New York Giants. Why would you trade a younger player who can still ascend, has a lot of potential and upside, for an older player who's much worse as a pass rusher in terms of his potential and long-term growth? I don't like that deal. But if the Giants are going to trade away a player in a deal for the number 1 overall pick, I would imagine that packaging Bobby Okereke in this deal prevents you from sacrificing a second-round pick in the future or a first-round pick in the future if that gets brought up at all, which I don't think it would be. So if you are trying to find ways to hold on to round 1 and 2 picks, yeah, maybe you do have to package a player in this trade to get up to number 1 overall. And for me personally, Alex, and I don't know how you feel, I would rather trade away Bobby Okereke than Kayvon Thibodeaux. I don't really want to trade away either of those 2 players, but for me, a 28-year-old linebacker versus a 24-year-old pass rusher, even though Okereke is the better player right now, I'm going to take the upside, youth, and potential of Kayvon Thibodeaux and retain that at a more premium position on his bargain rookie contract. So I would prefer to trade Okereke if we're trading one of those 2 guys. I wonder what your take on that is. And again, to clarify, I don't want to trade either one of these guys. In an ideal world, the Giants just trade 2 third-round picks and they move up 2 spots and they don't have to package any players in this deal. But it's not an ideal world. And the NFL is a business, and it's a crazy one at that. So if you had to pick between those 2 guys, Alex, Bobby Okereke, Kayvon Thibodeaux, if you had to include one of those guys in that trade, which one would you prefer?
I'm obviously trading Okereke at this point because he has 1 year left on his deal. Kayvon, like you said, 24, young, has not reached his potential, still has 2 years left of pretty cost-controlled play on his contract because they're going to pick up the 5th-year option. It's about $14 million. So, yeah, I'm keeping Kayvon. Now, the only thing, and like outside of your question, that concerns me is that if the Giants don't want to give up primo draft capital, they don't want to have to give up more than a third this year and a second next year, or a second this year and a third next year, they're going to be forced to swap Kayvon and Harold Landry, unfortunately. That's kind of how I see the last piece of the puzzle unfolding here. If they're like, yeah, we are not giving you any more of this draft capital, we're giving you a chance to take your blue chip prospect and obviously, whether it's Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, and get extra draft capital out of it, you're getting the player or players that you wanted, plus extra draft capital just for us to get our quarterback, and you're not even sold on him anyway. We're not giving up any more than that. And if Titans like, okay, you know what, that makes sense, but we have all the leverage here because we don't have to move out. You're going to take this Kayvon and Landry swap because you don't want this contract anymore. That'll be the last piece of the puzzle for the Giants, in my opinion. That's probably what they're going to demand. I don't think they want Bobby Okereke because he has 1 year left and he's old. He's 28, coming off some injuries, had a herniated disc at the end of the season. So I do think that obviously Kayvon is the more valuable player in this equation by far. It's just a matter of, can the Giants figure out a way to satisfy whatever it is the Titans want without having to trade a good, valuable pass rusher, like you said. I don't want to move Kayvon for Harold Landry. I just think the Titans are going to force them to because they have leverage in this instance. And if that's the holdup, if that's the last piece to the puzzle, Anthony, I think the Giants are going to pull the trigger on that if that's the last thing. And, that's what's standing between them and getting the quarterback that they want, which in this instance, like everyone's saying, is Cam Ward. That's kind of how I feel about it. Okereke, on the other hand, I'm fine letting his contract expire. You know what I mean? I have no intention to do anything with him. You're not going to save much money by letting him go, by cutting him. You don't want to cut him post June 1st. You're just spreading out dead money for no reason for 2 years for a player that is still valuable to this team, by the way. The only thing that I can muster is that Shane Bowen doesn't want him. That's the only thing that comes to my mind. And I don't want Shane Bowen. So, there's that. I'd rather Bobby Okereke than Shane Bowen. That defense last year had holes all over it. But he can still be a very solid player. And Bobby Okereke never complained, never said anything bad, always held his head up high, played through injuries, was an immaculate pro. I don't see why the Giants would want a player like this to go. You know what I mean? He is a solution in a team that has more holes than more questions or problems than answers. You know what I mean? This is why the Giants are the Giants. They constantly push out players that are valuable to this team. And at nominal costs, by the way. Bobby Okereke at $10 million is a very good price tag with the way that players are getting paid right now. That's a very fine price tag for a player like him. I don't get it. I don't see it. I don't know why they would do this unless there's something that we just don't know, which is totally possible. But speaking about moving up to the first round selection, Anthony, we're hearing a lot of conflicting reports right now about what it would take. There was a couple, I think from Spot Rack or Over the Cap, one of those guys that, evaluates the cost of moving up and has those value charts, said that in a normal draft class, in a normal year based on historical trends, it would take a first-round pick in 2026 to move up. In this year's draft class, with the context of the quarterbacks and whatever it might be, I don't think that's the case. However, if the Giants are being forced and that's the only way the Titans are going to move out for a first-round pick next year, I'm not doing it. I'm happy staying at 3, letting the draft come to us, and selecting the BPA, or maybe Cam Ward ends up naturally falling to you. Because worst case scenario, you walk away with Abdul Carter, who's an elite pass rusher, projected at least, and Travis Hunter, who's also one of the 2 blue chip prospects in this draft class. How do you feel about that? Would you be willing to trade up for a first round future one for Cam Ward, or are you let's just stick and pick?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think it's a question you can even ask right now. We have to see what happens in free agency first and foremost. I can't give you an opinion on that. If the Giants sign Sam Darnold, no, I'm not trading a future first, because they just signed a quarterback to some sort of $30+ million per year contract across 3+ seasons. That's what Darnold would get. So if they go after a Darnold or a Geno Smith on the trade block, or somebody who's going to be their starter for multiple seasons, no, you don't trade a first round pick because you just got your quarterback as your starter for more than 1 year. Now if they trade, or if they go ahead and they sign Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers, and the intention is to make that player a bridge, then everything is on the table. Potentially trading up and sacrificing a first to move up to number 1 is on the table. But I don't think it comes down to that. The Giants have made a lot of trades over the last 3 years. They haven't overpaid for any of them. Let's be real about it. They haven't all been great trades. We've definitely had room for criticism for the Waller trade in retrospect. Obviously, we were a fan of it at the time. We've had room for criticism for the Brian Burns trade. I had that immediately, and a lot of people now praise it, and so do I, but there is still room for criticism. A lot of the trades, trading up for Jalen Hyatt, trading up for Deonte Banks, all of these trades have, sure, been open to criticism, but none of them have been overpays by any stretch of the imagination. I don't see Joe Schoen now finally overpaying to move up to the number 1 overall pick. That's why the Giants are so intentional about getting a veteran quarterback in this room within the next few days here. They're not going to go ahead and sacrifice too many assets for an unknown commodity. They want a known commodity. They're all about raising their floor right now rather than their ceiling, because they know that raising the floor is how they save jobs. So I don't think a first round pick is going to be part of the conversation. So I don't even think I need to answer whether or not I would do it. I probably wouldn't, but also it's just not something that you can answer right now, because we don't know who the Giants starting quarterback is in week 1 of this year, because we haven't gotten through free agency. So that's where I stand on it. I don't know if you also have the same opinion that the perspective shifts based on free agency. I don't think that you can properly evaluate what the Giants should or shouldn't do with their first round draft pick until we know who the Giants sign in free agency. That's just my opinion on it, because I think that it changes. if they go out there and they trade for a quarterback, they're not going to trade more assets to trade up for another quarterback. The reports were that if they did land Matthew Stafford, they weren't using the number 3 overall pick on a quarterback. That was one reporter's opinion of it, and that's something that they heard at the combine. So if they were traded for Stafford, they likely would have just went ahead and, you know what they would have done? Travis Hunter at 3, maybe Jackson Dart at 34, we'll see. So I think that it's really difficult to project what the Giants are willing to give up versus what they will give up right now, because we don't know what they've done at the quarterback position in terms of which veteran they're bringing in. But once we get that answer, then we get a clearer picture of everything. But I do want to actually add some context to this, Alex, before I hand it back to you. And just discuss, I watched the NFL Stock Exchange yesterday. It's a podcast with Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers. They both, Trevor Sikkema is the lead draft analyst for PFF. Connor Rogers works for NBC Sports and used to be on the New York Jets beat. So they're plugged in. They have a lot of information, and they were at the combine, and they shared some thoughts on what they heard. And I want to share their thoughts with the audience listening to us, and also with you, Alex, to get your take on this, because they had a lot of interesting information on the quarterbacks at the top of this draft class. Now, the first quote that I'll read off is this one. Trevor Sikkema said it was all but unanimous. Cam Ward is the quarterback 1 in this draft class. And he went on to say, Alex, that he questions whether or not a team inside the top 10 will even take Shedeur Sanders, including the New York Giants. Of course, it will be contingent on free agency. If the Giants can't get a guy that they like, and if they completely miss out on all the free agents, then yeah, maybe they bend the knee and they take Sanders. But Trevor Sikkema, and that's not just Trevor Sikkema, I saw a few other reporters and analysts having Shedeur slip well down the draft board. I saw Tony Pauline of Sportskeeda had Shedeur Sanders going number 29 overall in his latest post-combine mock draft. So I want to get your general take on this, Alex, and I'll read off some more of these quotes from Rodgers and Sikkema as we go through. But just before I dive further into it, what's your take on this? You know, the Giants, all the rumors indicate that they want to trade up to 1 for Cam Ward. Everybody's saying that it's clear consensus number 1 quarterback Cam Ward. And a lot of people are now saying that it's a closer race for QB 2/3 between Sanders and Dart than it is for QB 1 between Sanders and Ward. What's your take on all of this?
Well, listen, my take on it is pretty simple. I'm not going to run a lap right now because we haven't seen what happens just yet. But my take for the last 2 months was that I saw Shedeur Sanders closer to Jackson Dart than I saw Cam Ward to Shedeur Sanders. That's been my take for months. The second take I had about a week and a half ago was that Shedeur Sanders' stock was not rising as we got closer to the draft. And that, to me, was a red flag. Because last year, we saw J.J. McCarthy, we saw Bo Nick, we saw all these guys, their stock start. I mean, there was such a heavy quarterback class. Obviously, there was going to be some outliers there. But we saw these guys start to generate a lot of buzz. Like J.J. McCarthy going into the draft class was a second-round pick. By the time that he went in the draft, he was a top 15 pick. You know what I mean? Like that was in one of the best first rounds in the draft I've ever seen. You know, one of the best classes I've ever seen. Everyone freaking played their asses off and it was an impact player, aside from a couple guys that were just injured, obviously, like JJ. But, you know, a week and a half ago, I was like, Sanders' stock is not rising the way I thought it would. You know, there's starting to be like some concerns. I mean, heard a couple quarterback coaches saying that he came off kind of weird in at the combine, and I don't really believe that stuff. I think it's all just a way to hurt a player's stock. We've seen this happen before. We saw it happen with Kayvon Thibodeau. We saw it happen with so many players. It doesn't mean anything to me. So I'm not going to take that and use that as like a way to defame Shedeur Sanders for in his character. Because I don't, you know, that those two anomalies seem like an outlier among a larger sample that says that his character is good. So I just don't see the stock rising to the point where like teams are looking at him as a top 3, top 5 pick. I'm even seeing now that I think you kind of read, it could have been a different mock, that even the Jets, I think this is from the stock exchange one yesterday, even the Jets at 7 or the Raiders at 6 aren't sold on him and may pass on him. You know, so like this is now a situation where if you're the Giants, is this a big smokescreen to get him to fall to 3? Probably not, because he's going to be there at 3. Like he's going to be there at 3. 99% sure of that. Cam Ward, the consensus QB1 in this draft class. The question is, how much do the Titans or Browns like him? You know what I mean? How much do those two teams like him? If that's the only guy worthy of a first-round top 10 grade this year, the Giants are going to have to give up a lot to get to that first overall pick. So that's the question. Now, the other question is, if Sanders is slipping that far, is there a world where we see them move back up into the first-round draft to get him? Now, or Jackson Dart. You know, those two guys. So that's a whole nother element that we have to now think about as a possibility. I don't think Sanders is going to drop past 15. I don't think that's realistic. But who the hell knows? If it happens, the Giants could be like, well, let's move up and get him. You know what I mean? Like maybe that's something that they would consider.
I mean, I said it jokingly, I think, on one of our live streams or episodes like last month. I was like, well, if Sanders continues to fall, maybe the Giants could get Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders in the same draft class. That's slowly becoming more of a possibility. I was joking when I said it a month ago. Now there seems to be an alternate reality, or this reality, where that does become a possibility. So I think it's very interesting. Of course, it is smokescreen season, as you indicated, and as we have to keep reminding fans who are hearing what we're saying. All of this is rumor and speculation, and it's all conjecture, and we don't know anything more than what you guys know, truthfully. And a lot of the guys that we're taking these reports from also don't know much more than we do, because it's just things that they heard, and they're not in those buildings and in those front offices. But one of the things that I do feel pretty confident in, Alex, because all of the top guys who, discuss the draft and are plugged in, they all seem 100% certain that if Cam Ward is on the board at number 2 overall, he is a Cleveland Brown. So if the Giants do want to draft Cam Ward and they're not that high on Shedeur Sanders, they're going to have to get to the number 1 overall pick and trade up with the Tennessee Titans. But this also creates a scenario, Alex, where what if the Titans are just like, hey, listen, Cleveland, we know you want Cam. We've got a compelling offer here from the New York Giants, but we know that you guys want Cam. If you trade up the 1 spot from number 2 overall and let us move down, take Abdul Carter at 2, you guys could take Cam, just throw us a 3rd-round pick and call it a day. Do you think that's something that the Giants need to be worried about? The Titans potentially saying, you know what, Cleveland, move up 1 spot, take Cam Ward, we'll accept a very low ball offer from you just to move back the 1 spot. We just want something in exchange for this thing. Do you think that's something that the Giants have to be worried about, is potentially the Browns moving up 1 spot to number 1 overall and sniping the quarterback that they desire?
Absolutely. Absolutely they have to worry about that, because the Browns want Cam Ward. They can tell the Titans, if you don't want Cam, we'll give you a 3rd-round pick for him. We'll give you a 3rd-round pick to move up 1 spot, and you get whatever player you wanted. So, it's a win-win for them. I think that's a major problem for the Giants.
And how much do you think the Giants have to overpay in order to prevent a situation like that from happening?
Well, it depends. It depends on what the Browns and who the Browns view as their top prospect. If they have Hunter and Carter 1A, 1B, they can get an extra 2nd-round pick from the Giants most likely and still get whatever player. They'll still get one of those 2 players.
The Titans
will still get Carter or Hunter, and they get extra value from the Giants and still get the player that they want if they have them graded evenly. And I think a lot of teams have those guys 1A, 1B. So it's like whichever one you end up getting, you're walking away happy and successful. So yeah, I think that the Giants have leverage because they can give more, because that's just the position they're in. And the Titans still walk away with the player that they likely want, one of the 2 guys that they want, and they're evenly graded. So, I do think that the Giants have a good hand to play. The reason that I don't love using these past historical trends of what you'd have to move up is because other draft classes usually have 6 or 7 blue chip prospects in them, at least just prospect grades. Maybe 5, 6, 7 guys that are all right, these guys are top of the line prospects. This draft class does not have that, right? I think it's Hunter, Carter, then there's a major fall off, and maybe Mason Graham you could throw in there, but after that I don't see it.
I don't think it's Mason Graham now after the combine. I actually think post combine McMillan's definitely one of them. And Bow, that one offensive lineman. There's actually several. It seems Shamar Stewart might be as well. It seems like after the combine, there are several blue chip prospects now.
So?
A lot of guys rose up the draft boards if you pay close attention to the way these mock drafts look following the combine. There were some absolute freaks, athletically speaking, at the combine. And Alex, I don't know if you saw this stat, but this was on average the tallest combine in history and the fastest combine in history. So this is, and I think it was the strongest too, based on average bench press, height, weight, and 40-yard dash times. This is the most athletic draft class that there's ever been. There are absolutely blue chip prospects in the eyes of scouts towards the top of the draft, because we know that NFL scouts don't always look at college production. They look at athleticism, they look at potential based on your rare physical traits and attributes. And there are a lot of players, not necessarily at the quarterback position, but there are a lot of players in this draft class that have really rare athletic profiles and size profiles. So there are definitely more blue chip prospects than we initially thought. About a month ago, yes, I would have agreed with you. There's really only 2 or 3 blue chip players. Now, I actually think that there are a lot more players that are going to be viewed as blue chip in the eyes of league scouts based on what we saw at the NFL scouting combine. So just wanted to say that. But also, I think that it's important to note, like we're talking about the Browns and the Giants, they both want Cam Ward. The Titans might also want Cam Ward. The thing here is, and this was, you asked me about would I give up this or that for the number one pick, and I said I don't know because I don't know what the Giants have done yet in free agency, who they sign at quarterback. It's actually all contingent on what the Titans do at quarterback in free agency. And I'm reading that they like Sam Darnold, and if they go ahead and sign Sam Darnold to a multi-year deal, they're going to trade out of that pick. They're going to move down, and they're going to let the Giants make that pick. But if they swing out, nobody wants to play in Nashville, well then, potentially, they go ahead and take Cam Ward at number one overall. Then what do the Giants do? And that's the next question. So segue off of the number one overall pick, but back to the number 3 overall pick. Is that Shedeur Sanders, or do you take the best player available? And let me throw this out here, because also from the NFL Stock Exchange, they had a really good conversation, guys. If you didn't see it, go find that channel, go listen to that episode. But they had a great conversation, and Connor Rogers was mentioning, Alex, that so we know last year the Giants had this plan to move up to number 3 overall pick, right? They wanted to draft Drake May. They were unsuccessful, so they stuck with the number 6 pick. They took Malik Neighbors. Well, he was saying that their actual plan there was to take the best player available in the top 10, and they were hoping that one of a Penix, McCarthy, or a Bo Nix was going to fall a lot further than they did. Nobody saw Michael Penix being a top 10 pick. The Falcons did a tremendous job keeping that secret under wraps. What Connor Rogers was saying was that the Giants were really hoping that they had a chance of trading back up into the first round to take one of those quarterbacks, namely Michael Penix. And he thinks that that could be the strategy again this year. Because they might not be in love with the quarterbacks in this class, like most of the league isn't, they might end up taking the best player available at number 3 over a guy like a Shedeur Sanders, and then hoping that Sanders or Dart falls later in the first round, and then they trade up and they take that quarterback there. And you know what, Alex, for what it's worth, this was an idea we pitched like 2 months ago. We've been talking about all the different scenarios, attacking this from every single angle, and at one point, you said that your preferred path is exactly what I'm saying right here. Take the best player available at number 3 and trade back up into the first round to throw a dart at the board, pun intended, with Jackson. Or potentially, now that Shedeur's stock is maybe falling, take him later in the first round. So I think that there is some legs to this whole thing. I think there is a possibility that Sanders does continue to fall as we get closer to the draft. Then again, his pro day could be spectacular. He could rise right back up the draft boards. We'll see. All of this is, again, speculation. But I am curious what your take on that is. If the Giants are picking there at number 3, Cam Ward is off the board, but they also didn't get the quarterback that they wanted in free agency. Are you still going BPA, or do you think that maybe you kind of do have to force it with a Shedeur at number 3 overall?
Look, my personal opinion, and I've been pretty consistent with this, at least from my standpoint, is that if the Giants are at 3 and Cam Ward is off the board and they don't trade up to 1, I'm going BPA. I'm not taking Shedeur Sanders. I never really thought that he was worth that pick. Like, that feels like a force to me, and it always has. For months now, I've been saying the same thing. I do think that at times you have to throw a dart at the board, as you say. I just don't think Sanders is a high probability hit. You know what I mean? I don't see any elite traits there. I don't see any elite athleticism. I don't see how he ends up becoming he doesn't scream like this guy has the chance to be a monster. Like he, at the bottom half of that first round, I see Jackson Dart as almost a similar level prospect in my eyes. I think that Dart could be just as good as Sanders, if not better, in terms of his upside. He's a year and a half younger than him, or maybe about a year younger than him, and a way better athlete. So I personally would prefer to go BPA, get Hunter Carter, reinvest in a strength. Worst case scenario, Travis Hunter's an elite cornerback, or he's a great receiver. Hunter is an elite pass rusher. Now you have one of the best defensive lines in football. You sign a defensive tackle. You have Carter, Kayvon, and Brian Burns, and you're an absolute horrid for opposing teams to face. You're just destroying them in the trenches, right? But you go in the second round, and if there's a guy slip into the 20s, late 20s, you float your second round pick for next year, and you say, hey, we'll move up with you, a couple spots, and we'll get Jackson Dart, or we'll get Sanders if he drops that far. And look, it's not guaranteed, and I'm not going to sit here and act like that's possible, because it might not be. But at 3 overall, I would take the shot on Cam Ward, because I think he has that level of upside. I just have never seen it with Sanders. That's just my personal opinion, and I would go BPA in that instance.
And I'll just clarify that I don't agree with Alex necessarily here. I would take the quarterback because I think the Giants should be desperate for one. However, I don't know who they signed in free agency yet, so I don't have an opinion yet. Just honestly, I know everybody wants us to have an opinion and a strong stance to take, but I can't do that yet. If the Giants sign Darnold or whoever, if they trade for Geno Smith, whatever they do in free agency, if they have a quarterback that's here and willing and capable of starting for several years, then they should go best player available because they already took their quarterback. They just did it by way of free agency / the draft. However, if they sign Aaron Rodgers, Alex, take Shedeur Sanders at number 3. That's my take on it. I will say this, though. My absolute dream scenario, which is why I jokingly said it last year, was that the Giants land somehow, some way, both Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders in this year's draft class. They have a hell of a connection already. They're both super talented, in my opinion, and they would bring the absolute vibes to the Big Apple. I would love to see it happen. If the Giants could somehow land Travis Hunter, and this is something, Alex, you know, I freaking love Travis Hunter, dude. Like, I am obsessed with him as a prospect. I don't see a world where this guy isn't an absolute superstar. I think he's so talented. I know a lot of people love Abdul Carter. Travis Hunter is my favorite and number 1 player in this draft class. I think he is so special. What an elite athlete and what an elite playmaker on both sides of the ball. If somehow the Giants can walk away with a quarterback this offseason and with Travis Hunter, I will be such a happy fan. But you can't sacrifice the opportunity to land a quarterback when you have one, and I've made that very clear. I've said many times you do kind of have to force it with a quarterback. It's the only time you draft for need over BPA. Other than that, you go BPA. But if the Giants land a quality starter in free agency, well, then I do go BPA because that's my draft strategy and philosophy. I always go BPA is how I view the draft. So it's very fun right now talking about all these different rumors coming out of the combine. It's very hectic and crazy, but like I said, Monday morning we're going to have a lot more clarity on this entire thing. Once we find out what that quarterback carousel is looking like, who's getting signed or traded where, and then how does that affect the NFL draft. That's what we're going to be keeping an eye on. So I do absolutely think there is a world here where the Giants are able to take the best player available at 3. I also think there's a world where they just take Shedeur Sanders and maybe their love for him is legitimate and not the smokescreen that it's now being perceived to be. So it's very interesting, Alex, if you have any closing takes here on the many topics that we discussed, because we went through quite a few here, but my last point is it's exciting, and I just can't wait for free agency to kick off so that we find out who the Giants quarterback is and we can have more informed opinions on what they do in the NFL draft.
Yep, next week is going to give us a lot of answers. I think the Giants are going to come out swinging, especially at quarterback. They're going to have these. They're going to need to get one fast because those veterans are going to go off the board fast. Justin Fields is going to be gone quickly. Russell Wilson, I'm sure, gone quickly. Rodgers, we'll see how quickly that materializes. Darnold, I think the decision there. I think that the Vikings might even tag him or extend him because they are unsure about JJ's health right now, and they're unsure if he'll be ready, and they don't want to force him into a situation where he's going to be set back. And also at the same time, they just had a pretty damn good season with Darnold, and Darnold's never been on a team where he's been winning like that. That was his first time going to the postseason, really putting together that type of campaign. You have to learn how to be a playoff quarterback. You know what I mean? He just got thrown into the fire there, and that was unfamiliar territory for him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he went back to the Vikings, to be quite honest. And the Giants are going to have to be quick and very, very, very aggressive getting a quarterback here because before you know it, they're all going to be gone, and the Giants are going to be sitting here contemplating Jameis Winston's of the world. That's the level of quarterback that'll probably be available, and it's going to happen pretty quickly with all the teams that need them. So I do think they have some ideas. They're going to be pretty aggressive. And then at other positions, we'll see as well. So, obviously a lot to unfold here. We have our blueprints coming out soon. I may have to tweak mine a little bit just because of what we're hearing in the rumor mill right now, especially with guys like Devontae Adams, who apparently wants to be on a winning team and go to the West Coast. So that changes things for my for my plan a little bit. So I may have to pivot slightly to see what other options are available on the trade market, but maybe more cost-efficient ones that, can be one-and-done type of players that we can then draft, quality prospects on rookie contracts in the future, or even in the mid-rounds this year. So we'll see how things pan out in that regard. We have a really in-depth plan ready to be kind of implemented here on both sides, cap, structures and all these different things for you guys. So I'm pretty excited to kind of unveil those plans this week. But Anthony, yeah, definitely going to be an exciting couple of weeks, next couple of days, even with the free agency opening up, but I expect the Giants to be pretty aggressive on day one.
Absolutely. I think they signed their quarterback on day one of the legal tampering period, and I think it's going to be a big-time move. It's probably going to be costly. Giants are going to shell out some serious dough for this player, but they have to do that, man. They have to figure out the quarterback position. And you don't just stop adding talent at this position after you get one guy in the door. When you have the lack of talent that the Giants currently have at that position, you're going to have to bring in multiple players to fill that hole. So we'll see what the Giants do in free agency at quarterback and then how that affects their decision-making in the NFL draft. Like we've said, blueprints coming out are what we would do. Off-season roadmaps are going to be dropping this weekend, and I'm really excited to deliver that to you guys. But also, we'll continue to walk through every scenario, what we would do, what we think the Giants will do, and keep attacking it from every angle, because that's how you get these little moments where I threw out just a joking idea a month ago just to kind of attack it from a new angle, new perspective, and now all of a sudden maybe it's a reality. And that's happened before many, many times on this channel because we are so diligent in uploading every single day and looking at every different angle possible for the New York Giants. So it's going to be a fun offseason for sure. It already is. But over these next couple weeks, it's about to get really intense and really exciting. So make sure you stay tuned into Fireside Giants. Make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review if you're listening to Apple or Spotify. And go and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one. And let's go Giants.